Am I late?
No, we still have 1 minute. Is Liz on?
She just joined.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Hi.
Hi.
We're not sure we'll have any visitors, but thank you for dropping by. We appreciate you every day,
Yes, we do.
every SRO, every day.
Every officer every day.
That's right.
Blue Lives Matter. How's that?
There we go.
There it is.
Okay, I call this meeting to order. If you'll stand with me and say the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, fantastic. Do I hear a motion to set the agenda?
I make a motion to set the agenda.
I second it.
Motion made by Stacy, seconded by Tammy.
Yes.
Okay, any discussion?
So I had brought up looking at our quarantine.
Yes,
Now, right now it's a discussion item. I would like to know a little bit more on why it wasn't added as an action item. And so I would like to discuss that a little bit.
okay. Dr. Vanderway?
So, thank you for your question.
Poor Cody, his.
Thank you for your question with the quarantining. I was working with Ms. Wright in regards to this question, but we have to quarantine people who are positive.
That's
And the item is this, I didn't know if we were clear on, if you read the item, it says Montezuma-Cortez School District RE1 recommends quarantine of a minimum of 10 days for any individual that are deemed a close contact of a coronavirus person. This quarantine is only put in place for people who are positive and kids that are unmasked. With the mask mandate, we do not have to quarantine our kids that are exposed to someone who is positive. And for those reasons, that's why it's not an action item, because it's a recommended quarantine. And so what's your feedback on that, Cody?
My feedback is you're absolutely right. It's recommended. You know, and I added it. I don't want to just open up our borders and just do whatever. I think there's things that can be done to make it safer, but in a more logical way. And so I
Okay,
would
just a second, we need to approve the agenda before we start discussing.
Yeah. So that's why I added it. I'm not going into details here. I added it for those reasons. And I think right now we keep kind of, you know, I feel really bad for Jacqueline Hall. She's had a lot on her, and we really haven't done much for her. And so I feel really bad for that, and I want to kind of get that taken care of. I think this is the route to go, and I would like to have it as an action item today. So.
Because we've set the agenda and this is a special meeting, we cannot change it. So we can put it on as an action item at our next board meeting, which is next Tuesday, correct?
19th.
No.
19th.
So
19th.
Cody, may I ask you a question? What do you want me to change here?
No, we can't do that.
Okay.
We have to have that as a discussion. Our next meeting is the 19th, so it's in 2 weeks.
So we can call for the question, and then during discussion, Cody and Dr. Vanderway, we can then discuss what can
Correct.
be changed and what were you thinking to
Correct.
as a discussion item to make it an action item for our October 19th meeting.
Right, yes, we cannot change our agenda. So,
Okay.
Any more discussion?
I just want to make a quick clarification since I just got a text too on it. Quarantine is.
Let's wait till we get on to the discussion, okay?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. So let's call for the question.
Hall. Aye. Houghton.
Aye.
Noyes.
Aye.
Wells.
Aye.
Right.
Aye. Okay, Liz, you're on.
I just want to make a clarification in language. Isolation is when a person tests positive or is in a household of someone who tests positive, then they're required isolation. That's not something we recommend or the county recommends. That's required isolation when a person tests positive. So we have no option there. As far as quarantine, that is a recommendation. So I just wanted to get our language right there. Isolation is for a positive test, and household isolations, especially those in the Navajo and Ute tribes. And then quarantine is different. That is a recommendation.
Thank you.
And so my question is, what in discussion item with A, this is what the language is in our citizens guide. So what do you want us to change?
Right now, we have it as, we're following the state recommendations. And I would rather do things that make more sense. So for example, you have two 12-year-olds wearing a mask, which I don't think are very effective. And the kids they don't have to quarantine. And so I would rather see a more proactive approach, instead of, just quarantining people. I would like to see them getting more temperature checks if they're a close contact and sending them home, if that is positive or if they have something. Right now, we don't have to quarantine if we choose not to. And so I'd rather do away with the quarantine, since I just fact checked me on this. We've only had 3 transmissions through our school. Is that correct? 3 positive COVID cases transfer?
That's no longer correct. We had a real upsurge in the last 3 weeks. And I would have to get a quick count for you, but in the 6th grade cohort alone, we had 9 positive transmissions. In the 5th grade cohort at Kemper, we're up now to 7 positive transmissions. And I could go on with different transmissions. So no, we have had a huge uptick in student to student and teacher to student transmissions.
And employee to employee.
And employee to employee, yes.
And so,
Go ahead.
and so we don't need a quarantine with a mask. So that doesn't make sense to me either. Like let's say they're spreading like crazy, but if you wear a mask now, they don't have to quarantine. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I would still, no matter what is decided, I'd still rather see a little more of a proactive approach as far as like monitoring symptoms and things like that.
So your proposal is that if a cohort, I'm trying to get this right, if someone in a cohort tests positive, instead of quarantining everybody, you want them just to go through daily temperature checks?
Yeah, I think do temperature checks. Now, I think that would change a lot based on if it's more of an outbreak versus one transmission or one person tests positive. If it's in a case where it's like really is spreading, I think we do quarantine and be very proactive with that. But if it's, we've had a lot of instances where one kid will get it and none of the other kids, it won't be transferred, but they're all quarantined. And so I think we need to find a way to kind of differentiate between those two.
So like the 6th grade that had 9 positive, that would be quarantine?
That would be quarantine.
Okay. And
Yep.
the 5th that 7th would be quarantine. So you're saying like 1?
Yes.
Okay.
Might I add that all of this happened prior to our mask mandate that started on Monday? And so with the mask mandate, we don't have to quarantine if both kids are masked.
Yeah, and that's kind of the problem too. With an outbreak, I just don't see that being effective. So now you have a kid that, let's say there is an outbreak and the kid's wearing a mask. I don't think the mask is really going to stop him from getting it very well. I've literally seen, our community, I've seen people pull down their masks to cough, and I don't see children being any different.
And what we'll do, Cody, is we will look at, do you mind just jotting those notes down and shooting me?
I certainly have them.
Okay, can you shoot it to me in an email, and then what I'll do is I'll work with, Liz, works with, Ms. Hall, or Ms. Richards works with Ms. Hall on behalf of the Citizens Guide. And we'll work on that and see, because we have a lot of this already in place, like the temperature checks, you know, but we will work on it, and then we'll get it out to the Board of Education and see what you guys feel prior to having it an action item. Does that work for you?
That's perfect.
Okay. Any other questions?
Is there anything else about, remember, we're only on quarantine. Is there any questions about that?
How many kids do we have quarantined today?
We had, I know on Friday it was 157.
Yeah. So
And
that's
we,
the latest update.
Five additional students due to a family member testing positive have been put on quarantine. And that was put on by public health. So 5 additional this week.
Okay.
How's our teachers doing?
in regards to,
Well, we had no teachers Friday, so how are we now?
well, what do you mean by, in regards to like with COVID, or do you mean?
Well, we had them out for different reasons.
Right,
What's our status at this point?
let me look, I can look at the sub list. I didn't count this morning.
So, but that was,
Since the meeting Friday, there have been no additional positive staff cases, but
Okay.
we still staff out.
okay, thank you. That was what I was asking.
Oh, okay.
Okay, any more discussion on quarantine?
Just a question, just what I heard Dr. Vanderway say, that you're asking not only Cody, but others of the board to send you their recommendations on quarantine to you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, we're moving on to action items, and remember, we're only doing this. We are revisiting what we did Friday. And the reason is because I did seek legal counsel, and they told me that what we did was in the gray area, and they recommended that we redo it. So, and it was because we added masks to superintendent stuff. And they said that for me to call you there's a procedure I could go through, but it would not be giving the community the feeling of transparency. So they suggested that we either do school closure or not. But at this point, I want to tell the community, thank you for keeping me on my toes. You have certainly done that this weekend, but it has made me seek legal counsel and stay proper and stay legal. So the next thing is school closure authority. I need to hear a motion on this before we discuss it.
I'll make a motion to accept school closure authority to provide superintendent to have this the school's authority to move into remote learning when needed due to emergency.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
Cody made the motion to give the superintendent authority, seconded by Stacy. Discussion.
I would like to have Risha kind of explain why it needs to be so sudden. For example, we know how many teachers we're going to have out roughly the next day. Why would it not work for an emergency board meeting? So I'd like to explain a little bit more on why you need the authority to do it so immediately.
Good question, Cody.
So, right now I have 62, I just counted, I have 62 teachers out today. If you look at other, Dolores right now is in remote learning. Dolores School District is in remote learning because they don't have enough staff. And sometimes, staff call off in the morning. Right now, we have 62 people out. I can't tell you, well, I can tell you, but I'm not going to count it right now. Over 20 of those positions are not full. we don't have the sub pool. And so at any time tomorrow morning, we could find out at 7:30 or at, before 7:30 that we don't have people to cover our schools because sicknesses come in, another piece is we have a very antiquated system of asking for subs, so it should be done online. I should be able to sit at my desk and see how many subs we need, but it's a paper process. And so we don't know, it's very, very slow. And so we're changing that, and we've been working on that for the last couple of months. But to be perfectly honest, I don't have to ask the board's permission to close a school. I close schools all the time. And as you've seen from last month, we closed schools due to threats. We closed schools due to bomb threats, due to gunfire, due to fire, due to wind. But I would rather ask before I close schools because of a workforce issue and or because of an uptake in the coronavirus. I want your permission before I do that. And that's why I'm asking, because I'm not asking to close schools right now. And I will not close schools if I don't need to, because I truly believe I've seen what digital learning does to kids and families. And I truly believe in in-person learning. This is in case of a dire emergency, and I'm just asking for your approval before I utilize my power to do so, because I can do it anyway if there's an emergency. If I don't have if I have safety issues in my buildings, I can close schools. And so I'm just asking for permission. I'm trying to be transparent, and I'm trying to be honest with the community about our workforce issues and about our uptake in COVID-19. And I want the board to understand that too, because sometimes I find if we don't have it in our conversations, not only with ourselves, but with our community, then people think we're doing things to do it to them. And that's not the piece. This is a health and safety issue.
I would like to just ask, with that being said, if we have a safety issue at the school, we have a policy set in place with our whole community on something like that. And we're all pretty well aware of that. As far as COVID, is there I don't know of any policy that states that you, and I would like to see it if there is, that states that you can make those decisions without talking with the board as far as any COVID policies.
Well, and what I'll do is it's not necessarily a COVID policy, but it's called a pandemic policy. And the pandemic policy allows the superintendent on an emergency level to implement emergency procedures.
Do we have that policy in our?
Yeah, I'll get it.
Okay, I will tell you, I have talked, this is one of the questions I asked legal counsel, and they recommended that we give her this. They said that if we hired her, we should trust her. But they said that it also goes along the same route as snow days, that when it comes to a safety issue, then the superintendent does have that right.
And I truly agree with you, Sherry, 100%. My concern is if and when we have to go to remote learning, and we have, like today, we have 62 staff members out. I guess my question is, how many of those are truly certified staff? And then are those people able to conduct class remotely if they're home ill?
Well, if they're asking for time off, if they're taking a sick day, we don't ask people to work when they're sick.
Right.
If they're on vacation, we don't ask people to work when they're on vacation.
So what would happen to those kids if their teacher is too ill to come to school? But then
What we've been doing is we've been grabbing anybody anywhere to get in those classrooms. My whole office
Right.
on Thursday, I came to work and I was like, where is everybody? And then I remember that everyone was subbing.
I think what you're doing is misunderstanding Stacy. She said that if we have so many staff out, that we have to close the schools. And if the staff is ill, who's going to teach the kids online?
Well, so, okay, here's the other piece. If we go online, we have a lot of staff that can teach from home or from their classroom. Because we'll have a workforce that can do that, right? So we're doing it now because if kids are at home, then the oversight is different.
Okay,
And we can teach, our teachers can still teach from their classrooms, or if we choose that they go home and teach. I actually prefer teachers in their classrooms because there's more equipment. And
Right.
when I've watched, like when I used to observe classrooms, when I'd zoom in, that's the one thing that's
So
fun
you're
about.
asking the teachers to come in to
Yeah.
teach in their classes.
And they would
unless they're
teach,
ill,
but the kids wouldn't be there.
But no kids, okay.
okay, so that's what would happen is staff would still come into the building
Unless they were ill.
unless they were ill
they
and
would
teach
still
from
work.
there.
Right.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, I was misunderstanding your question.
And I didn't understand the whole situation. I didn't ask all the right
Yeah,
I
questions.
have a great
If we go to
clarification.
distant learning,
Yeah.
then the teachers would stay in their classrooms and teach.
I have a question to that. If they're
Sure.
able to come into the classroom to teach, why aren't we having students in the seats while they're teaching? I mean, what are the reasons for being gone, that they can actually be gone, but then come back into the classroom to teach remotely?
The sick teachers would not be in the classroom.
So just like what's happening with Dolores right now, they don't have enough people to oversee all the kids, but they are remote learning. So all the kids are learning from home, but it just divvies up, like it allows, you don't necessarily need, you don't need 5 teachers teaching the same content if you're on digital learning.
Right.
And so it just opens up the oversight of kids, because our problem is it's not necessarily, if we have all of 5th grade out, we can have kids watching another 5th grade class, because digital is digital. We can just assign different kids to different rooms. Is that perfect? No, but you can still do that.
So
Does that make sense?
On one level it does, but on other levels it doesn't. But my whole goal is to keep these students in these seats at the school.
Absolutely. Me too.
So
So I'm thinking if we would have a lot more parents and community members volunteer their time, let alone wanting to be paid, but volunteer their time if we removed the mask mandate from
Sherry,
staff.
that's under masking. Let's stay on superintendent.
It still pertains to subbing and teacher retention
Yes, it
and
does. I agree. I'm just trying to make sure that we stay legal because we're being monitored very carefully. So giving Risha school authority, my concern is that if we give this to you, then we're notified as quickly as parents are. And I will tell you that a lot of the emails I'm getting are the parent concerns because they have no one to watch their kids if we close schools. So that has to be a very last resort.
This is this is only under an emergency. This is the very last resort. I do not want kids to stay home. I do not want to put pressure on parents. Everyone has enough pressure. I want our kids here going to school, but this is if we have no other alternative.
I have a couple questions.
And if I have the ability to throw an emergency board meeting, that would be the goal.
Yeah,
But this is just in a very unique situation. I'm just trying to be proactive so that there's no shock to you guys.
Cody,
Yes. Okay. So Risha, if you went to remote learning, would it be district-wide or would it be a specific school?
Generally speaking, it would be district-wide, but it could be The challenge is, Cody, I can't offer one set of kids to be in school and another set of kids to be digital. Like, we have to provide equal education opportunities. And that's why we're looking at other spaces of how we can shift opportunities of, like, if we have one school that ends up having, like, let's say, the elementaries are easier to use as examples, and these are only examples. So anybody who's listening, please know that this is not going to happen. But let's say we have an issue with, like, we don't have any issues with Pleasant View or Lewis, but I'm going to use them as an exemplar. So let's say we have Pleasant View and Lewis, and we don't have an adequate workforce. What we're doing is we're looking at how we can temporarily move those kids to the other elementaries, let's say in town, that have lower class sizes, and move the available staff from those two schools over there as well. Now, if we leave Lewis and Areola out of it, because generally they have zero, they actually don't have any COVID issues that I know of as of right now, at least not, I think it's, I want to say Pleasant View. Anyway, let's say we're talking about in-town schools. So I'm just going to throw a school out there. Don't worry, it's just an exemplar. But let's say Kemper, that we just had to, their 5th grade. Let's say their 5th grade, their teachers are out for a bit. They're all quarantined. Let's say the kids that are being quarantined need a different classroom to go to. So then we shift and we put, let's say they have 3 classes in Kemper. We put 2 classes in Mesa, 1 class in Mana. And then we,
Are you saying it's, you're confusing me. So
we're just,
are you saying online, we're putting them in class?
No,
Or
I'm saying physically
moving?
to keep the kids in school. So there's a lot of different options. Instead of closing the whole district down, I'm looking at different ways that we can reshift, position kids temporarily to in school. And then we have more staff because we have different, we're becoming more efficient. And so we're looking at other ways to become more efficient besides going straight to digital, but it's very, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that your idea there sounds really good. It sounds far superior even than having subs come in. So I really like that, and it makes me happy that you're looking at the option far before school closures. So, anything else? I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, that's all. I can confuse people very quick when I get.
Yeah, you were, I don't know if my mind was wandering or if I just wasn't.
Right.
Any more?
I have a question.
Okay.
So Dr. Vanderway had said earlier in our discussion on this action item that we are not in emergency yet.
Right.
And I appreciate Dr. Vanderway of being proactive. But if we're not there yet, seems to me that we don't need to give these powers to her yet, because she is putting action items in place that can be done without these powers, because as she says, she already has some of those day-to-day authorities that's given to her. I would prefer to look at this later on in at our next board meeting and or November. We're not there yet. We would still be ahead of the curve, in my opinion.
So you're suggesting that we move it to an action item at our 19th meeting or our November meeting?
Correct.
Understand that in our November meeting, we will be seating new board members.
Understanding either of the meetings is suffice. It's just as of today, we're not in that emergent at this point in time. And as Dr. Vanderway pointed out, and I did look up that policy real quick while we were online, and she does have some of those day-to-days that's given to her to be proactively restructuring these students when we're short-staffed, to keep their butts in the seats, because that's where we know they perform and do much better at. I just don't feel this is something that's immediate for today. But definitely something in a couple weeks, we'll have better numbers as the virus season stays with us, flu and COVID and common cold and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I just don't think right now that we need to give this to Dr. Vanderway, because she already has those authorities, as she has pointed out to us quite proficiently.
Hey, Rachel, quick question for you. We've been talking about looking what, giving you powers in emergency. What does the emergency look like for you? How close are we? And what's the line where you would call it?
Well, as I said, Dolores shut on Friday.
Yeah.
So Friday they shut for a week because they don't have enough people. I can tell you, I hear every day from all of my schools that my administrators talked to all of you the other day. Teachers and staff, they are exhausted. They feel like it's May. Like it's a very interesting year. Like, I've never seen so many resignations. I think I'm more worried about a workforce shortage. Okay, so let me back up 2 steps. This did not start today. This has been here for quite some time, and I need to create a strategic plan, a 3 to 5 year plan for workforce development and retention. And I'm currently working on that with Ms. Elridge and with Kyle. We're developing a plan that we're going to lay out to you guys, and hopefully at the October 19th or 18th meeting. But I think that this workforce problem is real. Every place I go, they're having a workforce issue, and I think this could happen. My teachers are exhausted. People are quitting. I think the workforce one is I'm really worried about the global pandemic, but I'm worried about our teachers coming to work every day. And as I said, I've had my staff, my staff here at the district office has been going in and subbing. My principals are subbing. We are at a critical point where every day I'm worried about it. So for our workforce, I think it's pretty close. COVID, I can't say. What Ms. Hall and Ms. Richards have been dealing with is, we had a huge uptake. I was at the county meeting today, which was great. It's just listening to things that are happening within our community I have this on here because we all need to be quite aware of what we're facing. But I also want to add that we're not unique with the workforce shortage, because all the restaurants say, please be aware that, food will take longer because of a workforce shortage. People are closing their hours down, reducing their hours. Everywhere I walk to figure out where I am here, and everywhere I walk, I see signs. And so it's our issue, and our issue is a little bit more concerning because we have children that we have to watch over and take care of. And, they need adult supervision. So does that answer your question?
Kind of. We're at a pretty critical point already, and it could get worse. Will you be able to implement, moving the kids from understaffed schools to other schools before we end up doing a school closure? Does that make sense? Did I make sense with that question?
Yeah, the challenge, so here's where it gets challenging is, I can talk about moving kids around, but when you talk to a teacher about moving them around, it gets personal real fast. And so I have to be very careful. I have to be very thoughtful, and we can do it quickly, but that would also ensure people would be leaving our organization if I don't do it thoughtfully enough. Okay. Does that make sense? Because it's very personal.
Yeah.
Okay,
absolutely.
so let's talk about, are we going to, any more discussion on giving recess school closure authority?
Yeah, I have one more question.
Okay, go ahead.
Risha, if we did give you authority and you see something coming, how soon do you think you'd be able to get notice out to us. You know, would you still be able to make a board emergency meeting? Is there like more hope for that? Is kind of what I'm asking.
So just so you know, the goal is that I would have an emergency meeting, and the goal is we would have a heads up. And, you know, I would not just say, well, since I have the authority, I'm not going to inform the Board of Education. That is not the goal at all. This is if I can't, like, this is if it's just a full-on emergency. And this, as I said at the last meeting, this is very rare. Like, I have had this before, but I have never yielded this power. Or authority is the word I prefer to use. I just want to be transparent if I need to use it. You would be informed as the process goes, but that's if it's a snap of the finger. The goal is, if I find out that we're gonna not be able to open our doors on a Friday night, then we can have an emergency board meeting Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You know, we have time. This is not something I would abuse. And that does take a little bit of trust on your behalf, because it's, I know you all have just met me. And so I know that it's a challenge to do that, but I would not abuse this. I just think that we could be going down this rabbit hole, and I really hope we're not. But this is, you know, this is a public document. People know, you know, this. I just want to ensure that the whole community knows that we're in this situation and that you are aware. And so it's twofold. One is to provide me the authority, and the other is it's a communication strand.
Okay, any more discussion? Okay, so we can vote on this, and then we can always go back to what Tammy suggested and vote on it at another meeting. So that's where we need to, you're going to have to make your own mind up.
Sherry, can I have one more question? May I ask the board for that part and to ask one more question of clarity?
Sure.
Since we're not in the state of a mandate, and this is just definitely just on districts closure authorities, what's the difference? I mean, I don't know if I've asked the question correctly, but emergency powers are definitely more specific to state mandates, but are not definitely towards school closures and district authorities. Does that make sense?
And Risha, I'll refer this to you, but you were talking about it being a pandemic authority instead of a mandate, correct?
Mm-hmm. Because you're right. You know, the thing is the challenge with all of this is we have no data. We have no information that says that we're close to a governor mandate for masking, let's say. There's none of that going on. So you're correct. You know, there are no mandates in regards to COVID. There are no mandates in regards to public health or our county. So, you know, we're not armed with an executive order from the governor. And so you're correct. If I'm understanding your question correctly.
You are, thank you.
None of this is coming from Colorado Department of Education. None of this is coming from the governor's office, the county, the city. This is all coming from Risha. And this is coming based off of the experience that I've had in dealing with this situation before. I have, to be perfectly honest, I have never dealt with a pandemic and a workforce issue at the same time.
Nobody has.
I've dealt with both of them. I've dealt with both of these and separately. And so I'm actually adding two things together because I think either way we could see momentum, and with local control, which I completely agree with. It's also a challenge when we have to solve the problems of the community here in this room. And I have to look at the numbers, I have to look at the safety. And, you know, I care very deeply for the children, the families, and the community that we serve. And it's my duty to ensure that overall safety and health is the forefront. As well as, you know, I really want to get back to talking about education and kids learning and teachers teaching, because that's what I do best. But
Us too.
I'm an organizational changer, so
Thank you for your answer.
thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, call for the question, please.
Paul,
Yes.
Houghton,
No,
Noyes,
she got kicked off.
Oops.
Can we add her back on?
We're trying to get her back on. I'm texting her now.
Okay, that's,
Wells,
Wells,
Yes.
right.
I'm struggling with this one. No. Is she back on yet? Did she lost her internet? Is that what you said, Tammy?
I believe so. She's working close out of,
There she is. Here she is.
there she's back.
Okay.
There she is.
You can go ahead and ask her now, Deb.
Sherry, can you hear me?
She's muted, isn't she?
Oh, there.
Sherry, can you hear her?
Okay, I'm back in. I don't know, it keeps, and I've not moved or anything from my spot, so I don't know if it's something on that side or my side.
Okay,
That's okay. We're ready to call for the question, and I called your name.
to give Risha the authority or not.
Noyes,
Okay, I'm a no vote.
thank you.
Okay, the next one is masking. I need to hear a motion.
I'll make the motion to recommend masking.
Motion made by Stacy to recommend masking. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion made by Stacy, seconded by Cody on recommending masking. Discussion.
So right now, if we mask the kids, we'll have an outbreak in a school and they won't be being quarantined. Is that correct?
You broke out, Cody. We didn't get the whole question.
Okay, so right now what it looks like, if we mask our students in the school and there's what, 9 students in a pod that have a COVID outbreak that are tested positive and it's kind of an outbreak. And then all of those people that they're in contact with won't quarantine. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Well, so mask to mask, if all kids are masked, they requirement is not to quarantine. A recommendation is not to quarantine. However, there is one stipulation on whether it's an outbreak.
What is that stipulation?
And outbreak is different because it's the certain amount of kids within a population that has, you know, I don't know, Liz, do you remember what the number for an outbreak is? Can you identify that one?
It's when there's 5 or more cases in a specific cohort. However, that does not, they do not require school closure or full quarantine any longer like they did last year. However, we do have to report the outbreak to the state, and they may determine to come in and make a determination on closure based on various variables, ventilation, the extent of exposure, et cetera. But it's not our decision to close schools or to quarantine an entire class because of an outbreak anymore. We're not required to do that. So it's 5 or more, but it's not our decision unless we just want to make that decision.
Can you define
Liz?
cohort a little better? What is a cohort?
Cohort in elementary is one class, so
Okay, per class.
one class. And in the middle and high school, well, we don't have solid cohorts in high school, but in middle school, they have groups of students that travel together from class to class. They don't intermix the students. So that's considered a cohort. They have larger groups called pods. So if a cohort gets infected, generally we'll close the pod, but the pods are up to 90 students who move together in smaller groups, but in their specials classes, they may be together. So that's how we define those groups.
So if we have 5 or more students in one cohort test positive, that's considered an outbreak. We quarantine the whole class, but not the whole pod.
That has been our practice. We don't have to do it that way if they're both masked, as Dr. Vanderway said.
Okay.
Even if there's a considered outbreak, we still don't have to quarantine all those students. We would only send out a quarantine letter to the close contacts, which are those students in front, behind, and beside in their seating chart. And it would be a recommended quarantine.
And that's discussion item A. That's the language we use, is we recommend. But the child can still come to school.
Okay.
But we've had the recommendation for quite some, this whole school year, correct?
We modified it a little bit because we didn't go through this last year.
Well,
These
no, but
numbers,
since,
so-
since.
So we're quarantining all the class,
Okay.
and so we've really modified it. So this is a tightened up. This is what we've done for quite some time. But we didn't start the year with that because we were more loose, because we didn't understand it all, because we never had the numbers that we have had.
Okay. Any more discussion?
A couple questions to Ms. Richard. When you said there was an outbreak, 5 cases in a specific cohort, that we don't necessarily need to go full closure or quarantine. You say they, trying to understand, they as our they, or they as county health department they, or CDC they, or could you explain the word they?
Right, when we have 5 or more cases, we contact public health. Public health sends us a document that we fill out describing the our outbreak and what group of students, how many students in the cohorts, they ask all of those questions. Then we send it back to them. They determine, public health, whether or not we should go ahead and have a closure of that cohort only, or if there may be a bigger problem where they might be thinking it's ventilation or something that we weren't thinking of. Work with us, and they would coordinate with us on next steps. We did submit our outbreak in 6th grade to them, and their recommendation was we quarantined that class. That would have been their action. We did everything we needed to. So the expectations of closures is less than it was last school year, but all of that is in public health's hands. Public health does then submit our form to the state, and the state may have recommendations for public health that they would pass down to us. But in the case of the middle school cohort of 9 that had an outbreak there, they did not recommend anything more to us than what we did.
And then my next question, if I may, I remember, and correct me if I'm remembering wrong, a couple board meetings ago when we were still discussing all this, I believe someone had mentioned about the close contact, that trace contacting of in front, either side and behind. Is that just our practice because it's in our guide, or is it something the health department is still doing on their side?
That is recommended. That the definition of close contact is anyone within 6 feet for longer than 15 minutes. And so we define that in the school setting as those sitting in close proximity of that student, because the only time they're together for longer than 15 minutes is in class. And so we have that, and it's specifically important in high school because they don't have a cohort setting. We have to pull all their schedules. The close contacts are all those students that sit close to that student in every class. And then we send out a close contact letter. But that close contact letter also has recommended language in it as well.
All right, thank you.
So if we require masks and every student is wearing a mask and student A becomes ill and student B and A and C, D, E are all wearing masks, only student A will be sent home on quarantine. Is that correct?
No, it's isolation.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah,
Student
sorry.
A would be sent home on
Yeah.
isolation.
Right.
And
The
stu-
language.
Yeah, and student B, C, D, E, and F would remain in school.
That is correct, but we will
Recommend.
still be required to send out the parent letter that there was a case in the class or in the school, but we will not send out close contact letters or quarantine letters.
But in the meanwhile, Stacy's scenario of students A through E, as our wording now, if A has COVID and B through E were in contact, we recommend that they are quarantined.
No, not with masks on if both parties have
If
masks.
they don't have masks on, or if it's a handful, if some have masks and some don't, it's the mixture of you do or don't. We still have the recommendations. If you didn't wear a mask, we recommend that you quarantine, but the parent, if the child doesn't have any symptoms, can still come to school, even though we say they should be in quarantine. Correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Recommend.
Recommend, yes, recommend.
Yeah, we need to remember that word. Anybody else?
What about extracurricular activities?
What about it?
Are you talking about, she's talking about indoor volleyball. So right
Wearing
now,
masks?
any of our students who are playing indoor volleyball, so we will not mask visitors. We will not mask people who are there to watch, but
It's
our
what a mask-
students are wearing masks. for
I can't go for that
indoor.
because they're breathing hard. No, sorry.
I'm not.
Okay, is there any more discussion?
I think that applies to everything too. FFA, sports, field trips, correct? We would not have them masked.
Wear a mask.
They would have-
Under if we do a mask mandate?
If we do a mask mandate, you would then require all these extracurriculars such as volleyball, football, softball, FFA, sports, band,
Well, nothing that's
choir.
outside. Nothing that's outside. It's anything that students are at. Because it asks for, requires students to wear. So it's students doing school-related things
In a building.
in a building.
Thank you.
This doesn't apply to outside.
Okay, any more?
So I want to be very clear. The recommendation would require all students at all times to be masked.
This is.
Practice.
If we go into a mandate, then they are required.
Okay,
Indoors.
so
Indoors.
practice.
But yet the audience does not need to.
And neither does yeah, so we're not asking the general public. We're not asking, just like you're here, you guys, like, I must note though, if you have a medical condition, whether you're a child, whether you're an adult, if you have asthma, if you have, with a note from your doctor, those are some situations. So it's not every child, it's a child with a condition or, they will not be required to wear masks.
But if you're playing volleyball, and you're out on that court, you're gonna be wearing a mask. If you're playing football, you do not have to wear one.
Right, soccer.
Any other
Right.
questions?
But only during high COVID infection instances, as this is written in our action item.
This is only for the next, till
Till the end of the week.
October, till the next, Next Friday.
Next Friday, 17th maybe.
this is to, let me look.
Do you want to add that
The
word?
15th would be the last day that they would have to wear a mask. Okay, any more
But
discussion?
it doesn't say that in this agenda.
No, it does
We
not.
can't add it.
You
And we
can
cannot
vote
add-
to add it.
No, we cannot.
Oh, I thought you could vote to add the.
No, we
the
cannot
dates.
add anything to our agenda. Anything else?
Carrie, I would just like for you to actually read the action item before
Okay.
you call for the question.
It says masking. Recommendation to require students to wear masks during high COVID infection incidences in RE1 schools.
And
Thank
so,
you.
You're welcome.
so who makes the determination that it's high COVID infectious incidences?
I would assume that would be Jacqueline.
Well, it's a team, right? So we have Miss Richards on that team, we have Jacqueline, and then we have myself.
Okay.
And with the uptake, like with the uptake of last week, where everything was, we were quarantining so many classrooms. That was the recommendation.
Any more questions? Discussion?
Such a difficult.
Okay, let's call for the question.
Paul,
Would you like being first?
No. Uh, I'm still gonna say yes.
Houghton,
No,
Noyes,
I am still in no vote.
Wells,
I think there's better ways to increase safety, so I'm gonna say no.
Wright,
I could not put a mask on somebody playing sports, no. Okay. I want to thank you for this. I will see you tonight at 4:30 at our next meeting. To the community, thank you for listening and knowing that because it is a special / emergency meeting, there has not been anybody to address the board.
Ms. Wright,
Yes,
can we just add to the meeting notes? The last two agendas said emergency meeting. They should have said special meeting.
correct.
I just recently learned that. That was my mistake. I'm sorry.
Okay, so they will, from now on, they will say
Special.
special instead of emergency. I close this meeting adjourn this meeting at 12:58.